In today's episode of Locked On Oilers, we take a look at a bunch of trade targets for the Edmonton Oilers. We will talk about that and much more in today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I am your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, we're going to go over some trade targets. So in the first period, we're going to go for some forward trade targets for the Edmonton Oilers. As we all know, the Oilers need some depth up front. So I have three options for the Edmonton Oilers this year. Then in the second period, we're going to take a look at the defensive options that the Edmonton Oilers could look at as well. And to wrap up today's episode, we are going to take a look at the prospect report for all the prospects over in Europe. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Where we are going to start today's episode is with those forwards. As mentioned, I have three options here for the Edmonton Oilers, and these are more depth options for the Edmonton Oilers. No, I'm not talking Patrick Kane or Jonathan Toews or Vladimir Tarasenko. No, I'm talking about these players who are going to be able to play up and down the lineup for the Edmonton Oilers and really add some depth to the Oilers. As we all know, that is what the Edmonton Oilers are lacking so far this year. The first name I have here is Jack Roslovic. Jack Roslovic from the Columbus Blue Jackets has one more year on his $4 million contract. So the Edmonton Oilers would have him for the end of this year and as well heading into next year. And he hasn't had a good start to the season yet. 19 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points for him. However, he's a pretty disciplined player, for a player who can have an edge to him. 0 penalty minutes for him this year, only 12 penalty minutes for him last year as well. Now, the knock on him has been inconsistency with work rate, so not sure how much of a gamble he is to get, but he has also shown that he can score 20 goals in this league. 22 goals last year, 23 assists, good for 45 points in 81 games, only missing 1 game for the Columbus Blue Jackets last year. He was coming off a difficult injury when he was initially traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets from the Winnipeg Jets for that Patrick Laine deal. Well, he was with Patrick Laine for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, the interesting thing is his goals against per 60 minutes. You know, I love my per 60 minutes, goals for, goals against per 60 minutes here, and he's playing on a very bad team. A 3.59 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, a 4.51 goals against per 60 minutes in all situations. So, how much stock can you put into that? I'm not sure for a bad team. But he is on the trade block, or allegedly on the trade block here. Not a very good team in Columbus. So could the Oilers try and cash in on one of those washovers, I guess, or free players, surpluses there? I think Roslovic wouldn't be a bad fit either. The next name I have, he signed a deal in the offseason, a player that I actually thought the Oilers should have taken a stab on here, and honestly, rightfully so. He's been having a very solid season in Chicago with 19 games played, 5 goals, 9 assists, 14 points for him, 29 penalty minutes. And those penalty minutes come with merit because his father did the exact same. Well, not the exact same. His father had a little bit more of a tough side to him, and that's Max Domi. Max Domi is a UFA or a pending UFA at the end of this year, and his contract's only $3 million, the exact same contract that Jesse Puljujarvi is on. However, Jesse Puljujarvi has 1 goal on the year, and Max Domi has 5 goals, 9 assists, 14 points. Max Domi is also producing at a rate that Jesse Puljujarvi could only dream of right now. In all situations, at goals for per 60 minutes for Max Domi, a solid 3.53, and 5-on-5, a 2.39. In the same breath, on a very bad Chicago Blackhawks team, his goals against per 60 is actually very good. A 2.98 in all situations, and a 2.65 at 5-on-5. Those would be in some of the top 10 for the Edmonton Oilers in both of those. And that was the thing with Domi. That was one of the reasons why I wanted him from the start of the offseason, was because his goals against per 60 is actually pretty impressive, considering as well the teams that he's played on recently. He would add some grit to the bottom 6. He's able to score. Now, I think as well, these additions aren't necessarily like bottom 6, but more top 9 additions. Guys that you can have on your first line if you absolutely need to, but mostly on that second, third line for the Edmonton Oilers. And the final one here for the Edmonton Oilers that I was looking at, and this may be a little bit of a questionable one, but maybe kind of similar to Puljujarvi. He just needs a new scenery. But that was also said when he was initially traded. That's Kasperi Kapanen. Now, I mentioned Kasperi Kapanen because he has a pretty team-friendly deal, although he does have 1 more year on his contract, so he's not a pending free agent, so the Oilers would have to carry that over. He's sitting at a $3.2 million deal. Not having a great start to the season either, but I think he would really add a very solid addition to the Edmonton Oilers' top 9. I'm still a guy who can really skate as well. Gets into dirty areas, even though he doesn't really get credit for that. Doesn't do it all the time, but he can still do it. 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points in 13 games did come off. I believe it was an injury earlier on this year as well. So maybe still trying to find his conditioning. But I don't know. The Edmonton Oilers have worse players. Let's just say that. And I think Kasperi Kapanen, even if you can get Pittsburgh to retain a touch of that salary, I don't think is a bad option for the Edmonton Oilers. So the 3 trade options I have for the top 9 for the Edmonton Oilers right now: Jack Roslovic from the Columbus Blue Jackets. We are going with Max Domi from Chicago and Kasperi Kapanen. Let me know, what do you think of those options? Am I cut out to lunch here? Are they good options? Who would you add if you were the Edmonton Oilers? Alrighty, let's move into the defensive options for the Oilers now, as I have 3 options for them on the back end. Yes, they did call up Philip Broberg, but they need more. I'm going to talk about those options in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer to even esports. They've got it all at BetOnline. Guys, Canada, Croatia, Sunday. Canada's coach John Herdman said they are going to, quote, F Croatia. Croatia has come back with tabloid covers of John Herdman. This one's going to be a fun one. I'm definitely taking a look at the lines for that match. And plus, if you love sports podcasts, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably do, you can find those at BetOnline as well. Head to the website today or use the mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Alrighty, let's move on to the defensemen for the Edmonton Oilers. Some defensive options for the Edmonton Oilers, as again, I have 3 options here for potentially the Oilers to take a look at, and I'm okay with some of them here. Actually, I'll be honest with you, I like all of them. 2 of them help the Oilers more defensively than offensively, but one could be a straight replacement and a better replacement. Tyson Barrie. Yeah, could be that serious. The first one we're going to start off with is another Columbus Blue Jacket. Vladislav Gavrikov is a player that has received a lot of talk recently when it comes to getting traded. And you know what? Even Bob Stauffer has mentioned his name a lot since the start of the year, before the season even started. A lot of talk about Vladislav Gavrikov. So he's a pending UFA, a $2.8 million cap hit for him there. And his numbers aren't that bad for a defensive defenseman. 19 games played for him so far this year, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, 8 penalty minutes, all better than, well, Evan Bouchard. So I don't know what that is exactly saying, but that is saying something. And in all situations, his goals for per 60 minutes is at a 3.2. So we'll take that. Again, his big thing is being able to he's a decent sized body. He can shut down the best players on the other team. I like Gavrikov. I think he would be a very solid addition for the Edmonton Oilers. I don't know. I just think you need guys like a Brett Kulak addition that the Edmonton Oilers had at the deadline last year that can shut down the other team's best players. And Gavrikov has been known around the league to do so. So if the Edmonton Oilers don't pick him up, another team will. And I think he will be one of those players where you sit there and go, if only the Oilers had a player like him. So Vladislav Gavrikov is my first option there. My second option is even cheaper than Gavrikov, but decent, a little bit older, I believe, as well. Nick Jensen, who plays for the Washington Capitals. He's also a pending free agent here, so Washington will be more than willing to move him, it sounds like. And he's sitting at a $2.5 million cap hit, so 2.8 for Gavrikov, 2.5 for Jensen. And he's having a solid year. In 21 games so far, 1 goal, 9 assists, 10 points for him also with 8 penalty minutes. He is another guy who is known, A, for his skating as well, but B, for being able to shut down the other team in his own end. And what do the Edmonton Oilers need? Oh, wow. Defensive defenseman. Nick Jensen for a very bad team as well. Not very bad. I shouldn't say very bad. For a team that's not living up to their expectations in the Washington Capitals, he's putting up pretty solid advanced numbers as well. A 2.16 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, which it would be in the top 10 for the Edmonton Oilers. So, yeah, we'll take that. We'll take that any day, all day. Nick Jensen as well, like I mentioned, is a pretty solid skater too. I think he would be like a Brett Kulak 2.0. I think he would be a very solid addition on the back end, bring some experience. He's won a Stanley Cup, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was on that Washington Capitals team. I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind Nick Jensen because I think you could line him up next to an Evan Bouchard and really have success. And with Gavrikov, you can put him next to, if you're not trading Barrie, which I'm sure they will. But until then, you can put him next to Barrie, play him solid 15, 18 minutes a game, and gets even 13 minutes a game. Get exactly what you need out of him. And then the final option for the Edmonton Oilers. Now, this one might not be very popular, let's say. But if the Edmonton Oilers are trading Tyson Barrie at some point, you're going to need some sort of offensive defenseman, and we all know Evan Bouchard hasn't done that. How about a pending UFA in Arizona, who's only 29 years old, and has secretly been one of the best offensive defensemen the NHL has seen for a little while? So far this year already, he has 12 points in 18 games, playing on the Coyotes' top power play, which, by the way, is top 5 in the league. Yeah, the Arizona Coyotes power play is top 5. And a lot of that has to do with the play of Shane Gostisbehere. Yes, I said Shane Gostisbehere. And the fact that he's only 29 when he feels like he's 35 is pretty impressive. A great puck distributor. He can really skate, has been in the league for a while. Yes, he's been on some questionable teams, but he's still a very good defenseman. He's not on a very good team, as mentioned. They do have one of the best power plays in the league, but in all situations, which his all situations number is actually better than his 5-on-5 number, which isn't very common. But in all situations, a 3.61 goals against per 60 minutes. Again, remember, that's with the Arizona Coyotes. And at 5-on-5, he sits at a 3.79. So, interesting, the little change there. But I think Shane Gostisbehere could really bring a dimension to the Oilers that they're missing right now. A puck distributor. I mean, look at the giveaways the Edmonton Oilers have. I mean, half of their giveaways last game came from the back end. You need a good puck mover, and the Edmonton Oilers lost that with Duncan Keith. That's what the Edmonton Oilers lost in a player that every game the Oilers fans are going, oh, get Duncan Keith off this team. Now Duncan Keith is off this team, and the Edmonton Oilers have zero organization in their own end. Zero. Hell, they might as well bring back Chris Russell. Genuinely. Like, they need help, and that's with moving the puck, that's with playing defense, that's with everything. So the 3 options for the Edmonton Oilers here, the first one being Vladislav Gavrikov from the Columbus Blue Jackets, a pending UFA at $2.8 million. Nick Jensen from the Washington Capitals, another pending UFA, sitting at a $2.5 million cap hit. And Shane Gostisbehere. Now, the thing I didn't mention with Gostisbehere is a pending UFA, but sits at a $4.5 million cap hit. Now, can you get the Arizona Coyotes to eat some cap? Absolutely. They have some of the biggest cap space in the league. But still, either way. What do you think with those options as well? Let me know who you would add. No, I don't want to hear Chychrun or Klingberg. Give me the players who are going to really help the Oilers in there. Either way, let's move on to the rookies, the prospects for the Edmonton Oilers, and we're heading across the ocean to Europe. We're going to talk about 3 Russians and 2 Swedes making names for themselves over there in the KHL and in the Swedish Hockey League. Alrighty, let's get into the Edmonton Oilers prospect report as we head all the way across the pond to, well, Russia and Sweden. Let's start off with Russia, as the Edmonton Oilers have 3 prospects over there playing in the KHL, and one of them has been playing pretty well recently. 21 games played in the KHL at Yaroslava Lokomotiv, or Lokomotiv Yaroslava, one of the two. For Maxim Berezhkin, which the Edmonton Oilers took in the 2020 draft in the 5th round, 138th overall, and really one of those quiet prospects. A prospect that gets a lot of love from prospect doers, I guess. We have to get one of the new Locked On NHL podcast hosts, Locked On NHL Prospects. That's an unbelievable show. You have to check that one out. We're going to have to get him on to explain more about Maxim Berezhkin. There's been a lot of love for him. As mentioned, 21 games played, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points for him in the KHL. Now, the thing about playing in the KHL, especially for these guys, is that they're playing against men, and that's big for the Edmonton Oilers to get those players playing against men. And Berezhkin, all of these players really are getting regular minutes in the KHL. Let's move on to a pick that was selected this year by the Edmonton Oilers, and that's Nikita Yevseyev. He was selected in the 6th round this year from the Edmonton Oilers, by the Edmonton Oilers, 190th overall, and it's pretty interesting. He was a guy that the Edmonton Oilers scout in Russia was very adamant on picking. Tyler Wright, the head of amateur scouting, said that this guy was the guy that he was willing to not put his career on the line for, but really wanted to draft, and that was Nikita Yevseyev. 26 games played so far for him in the KHL, 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points for him. Only 18 years old. Now, unfortunately, he is currently out with a lower body injury as he suffered a disgusting knee-on-knee hit with a player from SKA Petersburg. He did get suspended 3 games. That happened on November 18th that he got suspended. So, but still, right now, Yevseyev is still out. So, hopefully a quick recovery for him, as he was actually leading the KHL in rookie points as a defenseman. So, and he's pretty big. He's like 6'5". He's a massive boy who can skate. So we'll see how he develops here, and we'll see if we can see him at a rookie camp sometime next year, hopefully. Let's move into Maxim Danezhkin, as he was selected in 2019 in the 7th round, 193rd overall by the Edmonton Oilers. No, that wasn't the draft. In 2020, the Oilers picked all forwards. I thought that was him, but no, that was Maxim Berezhkin, not to get confused with Maxim Danezhkin. So far this year for Danezhkin, 18 games played in total, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. All of those points, however, coming in the KHL with Gornyak UGMK. However, he has only played 13 games at the KHL level because he's coming off a 10-game suspension. Yes, Danezhkin was the one who, unfortunately, you know what? It was a stupid play, but an unfortunate outcome, as the player that he did hit into the boards did break his femur. It was a very ugly injury, and yes, unfortunately had to sit out 10 games, but he is on the way back now. 39 penalty minutes for Danezhkin already this year in those 13 games. That's insane. So, especially, those are clean cost and numbers for him there. But Danezhkin is playing for Gornyak, as mentioned there. Not a player that, other than the stuff that I have seen, obviously, not too familiar with. So I'm excited to see where he goes over the next couple of years. Let's move on to the 2 Swedish players right now, as Jeremias Lindewall was a part of that draft that the Edmonton Oilers just picked all forwards. He was selected in the 7th round, 200th overall. He's currently playing at Östersund down in Sweden there. 19 games played, having a little bit of a tough year so far. 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points for him. Again, 7th round pick. Would be interesting to see how he turns out, but I'm really excited to see how the next player develops. The Edmonton Oilers finally selected a goaltender this year in the 5th round at 158th. He had a lot of question marks going into this year, and when he was selected, a lot of people looked at his stats and went, "Oh, really? Him?" Well, so far this year, Samuel Johnsson has really turned it around for Rögle in the SHL. 8 wins, 6 losses, none coming in overtime. His save percentage last year, in the last couple of years, playing for a really bad team, was sub 900. This year, it's at a 908 with a goals against average of 2.16. Now, over the last 3 games, for Johnsson, a save percentage of 0.964. He's having a big month, a big couple of weeks. Even his last 10 games, he's sitting over 920 as well for his save percentage. So actually, I think he's sitting over at 930. So he's having a very solid year and a very solid month so far for him. It's very important to see as another guy who's coming into camp with a lot of question marks around him. Who is this guy? How big is he? Well, it turns out he's over 6 feet tall. He's 6'5" as well. And you know what? It looked pretty solid at the rookie camp at the start of summer. I'm interested to see how Samuel Janssen comes together. That is where we are going to wrap it up. As I want to apologize, as yesterday there was no episode. I apologize for that. I actually recorded this exact episode basically yesterday, but there was way too many audio issues. It was popping all over the place. Just couldn't salvage it. I just couldn't salvage it. I have 2 jobs on the go, so I apologize for that. 3 jobs, really. But I apologize for that. I will make it up to you at some point this month. But either way, the Edmonton Oilers are back in action tomorrow in New York at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, as they play the New York Rangers in an 11 a.m. matinee. That one's going to be... We all know how the Oilers do in matinees. Either way, I shall see you on the other side of the weekend. I hope you enjoy the game tomorrow and Canada on Sunday, baby. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. And until then, play La Bamba, baby.